everyone, it's Erin, and I am here today to give you a in-depth review of the Oresteia by Aeschylus. This is part of my Classics Club series where I have committed to read 50 classics in 5 years. Hopefully it will take me less time than that, actually. And every time I read one of those books, I do a written review that I post on my blog, which will be linked below. And then I also do a review here on my YouTube channel for those of you guys who would rather just watch a review. So this is kind of a review, kind of a discussion, kind of just me like talking about how I feel about the book. This one is going to be a little bit different from most of the other ones just because it's really old. The Oresteia. I mean, usually what I'll do is give kind of like broad impressions, like short review of 5 or 10 minutes that's non-spoilery, so you can kind of, if all you want to know is what I thought about the book, just kind of broadly, then you'll have that. And then if after that point, then I go and give a more in-depth discussion and share my thoughts that are more spoilery and maybe talk about things that are more spoilery. This book is, well, first of all, it's a trilogy of plays, and it's kind of, you can't talk about it unless you talk about what happens. So just spoilers all around are coming very quickly, so heads up on that. Also, if you hear background noise, I live next to my community's pool, which is usually fine, but it's Memorial Day and there are some people out there just hanging out, and they're not like being loud or obnoxious or anything, which I appreciate, but you might hear them, so that's what that is. Also, I have some notes on my computer, so if I'm looking down, that's what I'm looking at. I'm not going to hold this all the time, but just some context. So Greek drama is the oldest form of Western drama that we have. They started it in the West anyway. I'm not sure about Asian traditions, but I do know that they have a really strong dramatic tradition, and that's actually something I'd be interested in learning about. I really don't know anything about it, but in the West, the Greeks were the first ones, at least the first ones to write it down. And their dramatic practices grew out of this festival that was held in honor of the god Dionysus in Athens, and it became this gigantic, hugely impressive dramatic festival where there were all of these different competitions and these massive prizes were handed out at the end. And think like, you know, American Idol, but drama, and also like as important as like the Super Bowl or something. Like, it was just a really big deal. Aeschylus is the oldest existing example of these kinds of dramas that we have, and so he is quite interesting just from a kind of like literary historical perspective. And then also this is a very interesting series of plays. So it was traditional for the tragedies to at least at the beginning be a kind of connected trilogy. By the time we move to our next Greek dramatists, like Sophocles, who was writing, I don't remember exactly, 50 to 100 years later, that had started to change. The trilogies became looser, or even like not connected at all, but Aeschylus was still writing very tightly connected trilogies. So that's part of the reason that this review from now on is going to be kind of spoilery. Some recommendations for reading. That was kind of my like really brief background to this, but if you are interested, because it is just very different from the kind of drama that we're familiar with, I would really recommend getting a version of the play that has notes, or the plays, I guess, and especially one that has an introduction. This edition, translated by Peter Meineck with an introduction by Helen P. Foley, is really good. It's published by Hackett. The Penguin Classics edition is really good. I'm sure the Oxford World Classics edition is good. Just double check and make sure that there's some kind of introduction, because coming to it without any kind of context and without any familiarity of Greek drama at all can be kind of confusing. The play, it's called the Oresteia because it centers around Orestes, who is the son of Agamemnon. Another thing that is useful to brush up on, that usually your introduction will give you, is a kind of backstory to the mythology here. So this is set after the Trojan War. So the Trojan War was the result of the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, being kidnapped by Paris, the son of the king of Troy, or running off with him, depends on the story. And her husband, Menelaus, is understandably kind of annoyed about this, and so he calls on this old pact that he and a lot of the other kings of Greece made, and they march on Troy. Agamemnon is Menelaus' brother, and so he's, you know, definitely invested in this, and he's also, I think, the kind of like commander-in-chief of the Greek armies. And so before they leave, he sacrifices his daughter to Artemis, I think, and his wife is understandably kind of ticked off about this. Then he's gone for 10 years. In some stories, Iphigenia, the daughter who was sacrificed, doesn't actually die. She's like whisked away by Artemis to live somewhere, and some other Greek tragedies actually in the Oresteia have Iphigenia like show up, but not in Aeschylus's version. In Aeschylus's version, she really does die. Clytemnestra is the sister of Helen, actually, and she spends 10 years stewing about what her husband did. She also takes up with this guy named Aegisthus, I think, I can't remember. Agamemnon comes home. He is just like actually a jerk, and so this is the first play. The first play is called Agamemnon, and we get Clytemnestra's story and her feelings about what has happened and her plan to kill Agamemnon, kind of to take revenge for killing their daughter. Agamemnon comes home. Clytemnestra puts on a show for him, literally rolls out the red carpet, and Agamemnon just like does not make his case any better by the way he acts, and also the fact that he's brought Cassandra back with him as a sort of like mistress. Cassandra is a prophet who has been cursed by Apollo to never be paid attention to, and so she warns Agamemnon that he should not trust his wife, but he doesn't listen to her because, you know, men have not been listening to women for a very long time. So the first play ends with Agamemnon and Cassandra both being killed. Where is Orestes? Off living in some other kingdom or something. He comes back after his father is dead, and he meets his other sister Electra, at the tomb of Agamemnon in the second play in the trilogy. It's called the Libation Bearers. The Libation Bearers are the maidservants who are helping Electra bring offerings to their father's grave. Those are the libations. And they together convince Agamemnon to kill Clytemnestra in revenge, even though that's matricide and he is pretty sure he shouldn't do it. But eventually Apollo like shows up and is like, no, you should, and so he does. Play 3 is called the Furies. The Furies are the goddesses of revenge or justice, and they their wrath is brought down on Orestes for killing his mother. But Apollo had promised to keep him safe. So eventually Orestes is driven to Athens, where they, with the intervention of Athena, there is a trial. And this is like the first trial. This is the origin kind of like justice by jury as opposed to, and law, as opposed to justice by like retribution and revenge. So the whole story actually becomes this story of like, what do you do when somebody has like done something criminal? How do you handle that? And so I will leave the ending to your estimation. These are very short. I think the longest one is the Libation Bearers, and it's like 40 pages long. So it's quite easy to read once you kind of figure out what's going on. Agamemnon's like 65 pages, that's the longest one. The other ones are 40. So these plays, I don't know enough to really give a detailed explanation of how the plays work. Like, they have dialogue, but oftentimes there are long speeches, and there's this really specific pattern that I'm just, like I said, I'm not familiar enough with to talk about. So doing a little bit of Googling or reading the introduction will be a lot more helpful than me like trying to explain it to you. One of the important features that I am familiar with and can talk about is the way that the plays were performed. There were 3 actors, and they played men and women. They were masked, so they had like a Clytemnestra mask and then a like Apollo mask, and probably all 3 actors performed all of the roles in all 3 of the tragedies. So they were the same people, just like doing different things. So there's a possibility that like character doubling was a thing, like the same actor who played Agamemnon might have played Orestes, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, we can't really like comment on that kind of stuff with a lot of certainty, because first of all, we don't know if that's actually what happened, and second of all, we don't know how the audience might have received it, because we just don't have anything. Like, it's amazing that we have this at all. But the chorus is very interesting. By the time you get to Sophocles, who wrote Oedipus Rex and Antigone, which a lot of people are familiar with, the chorus had become kind of this group of people that represented the people of the city or something, and they were kind of there to like comment on the events or to be a sort of like sounding board for one of the main characters, so he didn't have to like talk to space. In this play, the chorus, which would have been the same body, shifts over time and is something different in each play, and it's really interesting the way Agamemnon does that. The first play, it is this like body of elders, and they do actually like engage with Clytemnestra and talk to her about how what she's planning maybe isn't a great idea. In the second play, the chorus are the libation bearers, and they help Electra talk Orestes into killing his mom. In the third play, they're the Furies, and they are the ones who are pursuing Orestes and who bring the case against Orestes to Athena, who acts as judge. So it's interesting to see how they transform and how Agamemnon takes advantage of them and allows them to become this kind of like collective fourth actor, even though he doesn't really have, like, he can only write for 3 actors, that's how it works, but he takes full advantage of what he has, and he creates a really interesting play. It's also interesting to see how women are portrayed. This is very much like a woman's trilogy, even though it's technically about Orestes, and I don't know like if some of that is just me reading it with modern eyes, and I don't know, like, I imagine that there is some kind of dissonance between the way the gender norms existed in ancient Greek culture and the way that they exist in this play. But the women here are very powerful and have a lot of authority, and I think that is just really interesting to see. Clytemnestra obviously is not like a nice person, and Athena is a goddess, and the Furies are women, and also kind of like maybe not super positive, but dangerous in this very interesting way. So I think the play, without like getting too deep into things, I think the play has some interesting things to say about questions of justice and revenge and punishment for crimes that we maybe, you know, would find relevant to read in our own time. And that was something that I found kind of surprising, but maybe I shouldn't have been, because a lot of classics, especially the really old ones, sometimes, you know, we need to take a hard look at them and recognize that maybe they're only interesting because of the kind of like historical and cultural value that they have. But I think a lot of them are surprisingly very relevant from a literary perspective to us. Personally. So I would definitely recommend reading this. Like I said, it's quite short, so if you're looking for a classic and you don't mind doing a tiny bit of background work, like I said, it might take you like 30 minutes to collect the information that you need if you've never read a Greek tragedy. And even then, like, reading the play won't take you very long at all. I think I probably read all of this in less than 2 hours. So it's a great kind of like short classic that has a lot in it and has a lot to say and is relevant even to our world today. So that's kind of my review. I have several more coming of these pretty quickly. My next super in-depth review, we're gonna jump really forward in time and to a completely different genre, and I'll be reviewing The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. This is the next book. I'm currently reading it. I'm almost done, so probably even in the next week or two that review will be up. So make sure to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in these videos. So far I've only done like one of them, but the pace is definitely going to pick up for sure over the summer at least. And so if you're interested in these kinds of things, I definitely check that out. If you've read the Oresteia, or I think I'm pronouncing that correctly, I asked a person who knows how to speak actual Greek, or actual classical Greek, how to pronounce it, and I'm pretty sure I'm doing it right, but I could totally be wrong. Anyway, have you read this? Are you interested in reading it? Definitely let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to start a conversation with you. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in my next video. Bye.